Hello all, and today my computer has become very laggy, so I've installed Chrome OS. Hence why you're seeing me at a different angle. Today, we are going to be taking a look at Presidential Elections in American History Part 10. We are finally on Part 10. We start today with the election of 19... that's gonna drive me crazy, damn it. Nope, it's driving me crazy. Nope, it's driving me crazy. Okay, we're starting today with the election of 76. Let's...
Oh, it's the eyes.
No, I want it big. No. Sorry, this is my first time doing Chrome OS video. Let's do it!
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History.
Oh, this is where my face.
The 48th presidential election in American history took place on November 2nd, 1976. The country was now over 200 years old, but during this time, an increasing number of Americans didn't seem to trust their government. This guy might be the reason why. Oh yeah, and this guy too. Remember how Richard Nixon won big in the 1972 election? Well, as it turns out, his campaign that year was up to some shady stuff. Some of his supporters broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. in order to spy on them. They were busted, and this was eventually known as the Watergate scandal. As it turns out, the Nixon administration was involved and later tried to cover it up. Nixon was forced to give up audio recordings that proved this. Facing impeachment by the House of Representatives and likely getting fired by the Senate, Nixon resigned on August 9th, 1974. Just like that, he gone. Gerald Ford, the vice president, was sworn in as the 38th president in American history. Hold up, what happened to Spiro Agnew? Spiro Agnew had actually resigned the year before. He had his own scandal involving him receiving illegal bribes back when he was the governor of Maryland. So Nixon nominated Ford, a dude from Michigan who at the time was the House Minority Leader. Congress overwhelmingly approved the nomination. Good thing the fairly recently passed 25th Amendment to the Constitution said they can now do this. Also because of the 25th Amendment, Nelson Rockefeller became the 41st vice president in American history. So what is one of the first things that Gerald Ford does? Well, he pardons Richard Nixon. Aw, that's so sweet of him. Ford was president during a tricky time. The Vietnam War was ending as the Americans left and let South Vietnam fall, which was a humbling defeat, and the economy wasn't doing so well back at home. The United States dealt with stagflation, which is when things basically cost a lot while unemployment goes up and companies produce less. In 1976, Ford tried to get the Republican nomination for president as the only sitting president who had never been elected to national office, and he had an impressive challenger. Ronald Reagan, the now former governor of California, nearly took the nomination. Going into the Republican convention, the two were dead even. However, Ford won the nomination narrowly on the first ballot. Because Nelson Rockefeller finally wanted to retire from politics, they needed a new vice president. So the Republicans nominated Bob Dole, a senator from my home state of Kansas, as his running mate. Just like in 1972, many sought the Democratic Party nomination. Four stood out in the beginning: Henry Jackson, a senator from Washington State; Mo Udall, a U.S. representative from Arizona; Jerry Brown, the governor of California and son of former California Governor Pat Brown; and George Wallace, who, despite being shot and paralyzed during the last election effort, was still going strong. Well, none of those four saw Jimmy Carter coming. Carter, a former governor of Georgia, took everyone by surprise by winning the early Iowa caucus and New Hampshire primary. Henry Jackson didn't even compete in those, and boy was that a big mistake. He never recovered. Ever since then, the media has spent extra special attention to Iowa and New Hampshire, you may have noticed. Check out Political Junkie and Step Back History explain this in more detail. Anyway, Carter capitalized on the fact that he was a D.C. outsider and a centrist from the South to become a successful dark horse candidate. Despite an ABC movement, or anybody but Carter movement, Carter got the nomination at the convention, with Walter Mondale, a senator from Minnesota, as his running mate. One-third
like he said, the economy's not doing so well, and we need new leadership. So I'm gonna vote Jimmy Carter because, first of all, I don't like what Nixon did whatsoever, and for outright pardon him, no, not a smart thing to do. So yeah, we'll see who won.
Here are the results. Jimmy Carter won, becoming the 39th president in American history. He received 297 electoral votes. Gerald Ford received 240. Ford actually...
It's not too bad of a map. We're gonna go ahead and... Oh yeah, one faithless elector in Washington... I'm gonna get my camera out of the way. One faithless elector in Washington voted Ronald Reagan for some reason. But let's go 1980.
So you think you know Wix?
Sorry about the ad, guys.
First up, we've got
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History. The 49th presidential election in American history took place on November 4th, 1980, as President Jimmy Carter faced quite a few obstacles, and things just weren't all peachy. The country faced low economic growth, high inflation and interest rates, and an energy crisis, in which the prices of oil went way up since supply went down in certain areas. This shortage was partially caused by the Iranian Revolution of 1979, in which a new Islamic government hostile to the United States overthrew the old one, and this soon led to the Iranian hostage crisis, in which 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage after a group of Iranian revolutionaries took over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Carter tried applying economic and diplomatic pressure on the Iranians to get the hostages released, but ultimately, by the time the election rolled around, he was unsuccessful freeing them. As Carter sought renomination by the Democratic Party, he did face challengers. His leading opponent was Ted Kennedy. This was the toughest primary race a sitting president had to go through to seek his party's renomination since President Taft sought renomination in the election of 1912, which, as you already know, ended up splitting the Republican Party. Carter and Kennedy were in a tight race, and some people tried to get Edmund Muskie, who is now the Secretary of State, to run against them both, just to break apart the deadlock between the two. It didn't work, but Carter had more delegates than Kennedy going into the convention, and he won renomination, with Walter Mondale also renominated for vice president. Ronald Reagan was easily the favorite to win the Republican nomination, but he did have several opponents, like George Herbert Walker Bush, the former CIA director and representative from Texas, or this dude, John B. Anderson.
Okay, just to prevent any more watch time, I'm just gonna say it here. Or wait, I'm just gonna skip Anderson.
Media attention. Still, no one could take on the popular Ronald Reagan, who it seems had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. Reagan got the nomination with Bush as his running mate. Meanwhile, Anderson had decided...
Okay, let's skip to the results. Oh wow, the results are long. Here we are.
So, Ronald Reagan easily won, becoming the 40th president in American history. He received 489 electoral votes, the most ever for a president elected for the first time. Pretty impressive for a guy who was called a radical by opponents for so long. He also got a strong 50.7% of the popular vote. He was the oldest president ever elected. Jimmy Carter received just 49 electoral votes and 41% of the popular vote. In terms of the popular vote, this is the worst performance by an incumbent president in an election since Herbert Hoover in the election of 1932. In terms of the electoral vote, this was the most lopsided defeat for any incumbent president in an election where only two candidates received electoral votes. I know you're still alive, President Carter, so if you're watching this, I hope you skipped over this part. In third place, John Anderson, who didn't get electoral votes, but received a respectable 6.6% of the population.
Let's go on to the election of 1984. We're not going to finish the series today, but I hope to get through maybe one more election today, and then we have part 11, which is Probably gonna go 88 to 2000, and then part 12, which is gonna go 04, 08, 12, 16. I might even add 2020 in there. All those 16 and 20 are long elections. I might make them their own part. But without further ado, let's go into the election of 1984.
File 100% free with TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of taxpayers qualify. Form 1040 and limited credits only. See how at TurboTax.com. That's me!
Doing this series a while.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History.
I think we'll go ahead and
The 50th presidential election in American history took place on November 6, 1984, on my 3rd birthday. Yep, this was the first presidential election I was alive to witness, although I don't remember it at all. Man, I guess that means I'm almost finally done with this series. Wow.
Which means I'm almost done
Ronald
with this.
Reagan was easily renominated as the Republican nominee after a strong first term. The economy had rebounded, and many Americans seemed to credit Reagan for getting the rest of the world to respect the country more. Sure, the government didn't shrink much, and military spending went way up, but that seemed to be what everyone wanted. Reagan talked trash about the Soviet Union, but more discreetly took the beginning steps to help end the Cold War. Vice President George H.W. Bush was also easily renominated. This was the only time both a vice presidential roll call and presidential roll call were done at the same time. While at least 8 Democrats sought their party's nomination, only 3 won any state primaries. One was Jesse Jackson, a civil rights activist and Baptist minister, and the first African American to be a serious contender for the presidency. Another was Gary Hart, a senator from Colorado who became the main rival to Walter Mondale, the former vice president in the Carter administration, who appeared to be the one to beat. Well, Hart came close, but Mondale came out as the winner. In a somewhat surprising move, Mondale went with Geraldine Ferraro, a representative from New York, as his running mate. She became the first major party female vice presidential candidate in American history. Mondale and the Democrats probably figured
I'm gonna go with Reagan because, like Beat said, the economy has rebounded and Reagan's been doing great and has seemed to been doing what everyone wanted.
Oh my goodness, it was a blowout. Reagan destroyed Mondale, easily winning re-election. He received 525 electoral votes. That was every state except for Mondale's home state of Minnesota and the District of Columbia. So yeah, Mondale just received 13 electoral votes. Reagan's 525 electoral votes are the most ever received by a presidential candidate. The popular vote wasn't quite as lopsided, thanks Electoral College for deceiving us yet again. Reagan got 58.8%, which was still incredibly high, and Mondale got just 40.6%. Okay, I guess that still was lopsided. We now know that millions of Democrats even voted for Reagan. Anyway, Reagan officially became the oldest candidate to ever win a presidential election. The next month, a White House social aide asked Reagan what he wanted for Christmas. Reagan jokingly replied, quote, "Well, Minnesota would have been nice," unquote.
It's about how it went, but that's where I'm gonna end part 10. Thank you for watching. And I will... How do I end the video? Hold on. And I will see you guys later. Whenever I can figure out how to...